So today's video, I'm going to go over probably the most common squat error that I see in beginner lifters, and to be honest, just most squatters in general. This is an error that you will, no matter how good you are, you're probably always going to do this error at some point. And that is basically just shifting your weight too far forward into your toes and losing the balance in the mid feet. So what I'm going to do is cover why falling into the toes is bad and what we should be aiming for instead. And then also I'm going to go over a bunch of different technique errors from real life lifters, which can cause falling into the feet, because there are multiple things which can cause someone to fall into the toes. I won't be able to cover every single point, because I wanted to use some real life examples of real life errors, so you can see these errors for yourself. So, what the forward weight falling into the knees look like, or into the toes, or shifting the weight forward, this all means kind of the same thing, is Christian is a good example of this. If we're looking at the path of the bar, we can see that as he comes down, it comes straight, and then the bar deviates forward towards the toes. If another way that you can look at it, if you don't even look at the bar, look at his knees, look at his knees relative to his toes. You can see how far Christian sinks in to his toes. From that, if you look at the edge of his butt and his thighs, you'll see that when he gets down to the bottom here, I'll put it slow. If you look at the edge here, when he comes forwards, when he comes down to the bottom, you can see it slightly shifts horizontal forward. I'll try to find where he does it actually more. This is a better example. If you look at the edge here, it's coming down, and then it shifts forward. You can also see how far of a diagonal he has in his shin angle. You can see how far these come forward. And then again, if you look at the bar, we can see the lines that I've got drawn here. When he comes down, ideally the line should come back up in the path that it was coming down. But in this instance, look how it, see how far, look, you can see the space here of how far it comes forward. Now this is a problem, because this is causing a movement inefficiency. Basically what's happening with Christian here, and again, as I said, most beginner lifters that I see, pretty much every single beginner lifter that I see, and again, this is a mistake that you're going to make even as an experienced lifter, of that if this weight shifts forward out of our mid feet, our base of support, we are utilizing energy now, not only to move this bar up and down from point A to point B, back to point A, but also we're wasting energy, or that won't be wasting energy, moving it up and down if it was in a straight line. But we will be wasting energy if there is horizontal deviation, because now not only are we moving this bar up and down, but also we have to correct for this horizontal deviation and pulling this bar back over towards the middle of our feet. Because if Christian continued to move forward or fall forward, in an extreme case, let's say he couldn't catch his balance back, well then he's going to fall forward and he's going to fall over. And we don't want that. So the most efficient squat is going to be when we can minimize any horizontal deviation in this bar. You know, you're probably never going to get it perfect, but obviously we want to try to get it as close to vertical as we can. In this more recent video of Christian, you can see how his bar is more straight up and down. He falls back on that first rep. But look at the lines. Remember the other lines? He had that when he was hitting the bottom here, as it come forward, or sorry, as he transitioned from the down phase to the up phase, this bar was going this way. And remember the line, there was a big gap between the line that was getting generated as he was coming up relative to this line that came down. But when he comes straight up, you can see that the path generally follows the path up. Oh, my computer's going slow. The path up generally followed the path down. If I put it in fast, I'll go from rep 2 to 3. You'll see it comes straight down, straight up, and again, there is not much horizontal deviation occurring. So this is a much more efficient squat. If we look down towards the bottom here, his hips are more coming straight up and down now, and it doesn't have that forward shift that I showed in the old video. Likewise, he doesn't have such a, his knees don't go so far past his toes. If anything, they're a little bit behind the toes. If we get down to the bottom here, he goes a tiny bit forward in that one relative to where we want him to be, but I think the second rep is quite good. This rep is exactly where he wants to be. So this bar is pretty much dead set in midfoot. He's got adequate angle at the shin. It's not excessively forward. And with that, because he's keeping his shins back, you can see the knees are about in line with the toe. So in this position here, you can see that Christian is not shifting his weight forward. He's basically coming straight up and down. So one last example of a quite efficient squat is Kirsten. She's doing tempo squats here, and you can see how straight that bar path is. Again, there's very minimal horizontal movement of the bar. She's moving it from point A to point B, back to point A in a pretty efficient fashion, because again, that bar has minimal forward travel, and that's basically what we're aiming for to make an efficient squat, is that if we're looking from the side, is that barbell moving in a straight up and down line over the middle of our feet. So probably like the first go-to error that people are gonna do when they're shifting their weight forward is just that. They are shifting their weight forward, and when they get down, the pressure in their feet are going towards their toes, okay? And you can even see sometimes the heels come off the ground, or even the back of the foot lifts off the floor. As you can see, this is actually my mother, and you can see with all, this is a very old video of her, and you can see with basically all her reps that when she comes down to the bottom here, you can see how far she goes into her knees. You can see how much pressure she's putting in her toes, because if you look very carefully, it's hard to see, but if you look at the back of her heels here, when she hits the bottom, you can actually see right in this position here, her heel is actually slightly coming off the floor because she's putting so much pressure in her toes. So this is a very common problem that I see with all beginner squatters, and this is like a forever problem that you are probably going to encounter even if you're an experienced squatter, because fatigue can hit in, sometimes the load's heavy, sometimes you might break concentration, you're just going to misgroove a rep. This is going to happen. To give you an example of that, this is myself. You'll see that when I do this lift, I am good for all of it, and as soon as I hit the bottom, you can see I abruptly go into my toes, and you can see this, if you look at the edge of the barbell, you'll see that it shifts forwards by a little bit there, or quite a lot actually, because I lose my balance into my toes. If I slow it down, you're going to see it exactly. So I'm coming down, I'm coming quite good. And then right in this position here, look how I collapse. So this is the position that I wanted to drop down into the squat in because I'm in my midfoot. But then I go, boop. What I'm looking at is, if you look at the edge of the plates and look at this bar, look how much it shifts forward when I hit the bottom there. All right, and then with that, like I was showing with my mum, look at that. My heel comes off the floor because I have fallen into my toes. So basically, I just made this simple error that when I got down to the bottom of the squat, I lost some of my weight into my toes and caused this chain reaction effect where the weight goes into the toes, knees go forward, hips go forward, bar goes forward, and then you need to pull that back so you're over your midfoot, because if that keeps going forwards, then that bar is going over my head. So basically, what you want to think of when you are squatting, or if you catch yourself always falling into your toes when you hit the bottom, there's a few different cues, but the cue I'm going to get you to mainly focus on is think that the pressure is in the middle of your feet. All right? When you are coming down, you're essentially pushing against the floor. When you're pushing against the floor, try to think you are pushing in the middle of your feet. Again, I'll probably keep going back to Kirsten's video because she's like my gold standard technique that I want to use. Her foot is dead flat. You can see that that heel is not coming off. All right, there is no weight shifting into the toes. She is putting all the pressure in the midfoot, okay? And that is what you were trying to aim to do when you squat, keeping all that pressure you're pushing against the floor in the middle of your feet. So as I said in the start of this video, there is multiple errors which can occur which causes that bar to shift towards the toes. And I will go through a bunch of these errors now. So this error here, basically what's happening with Carmen, I mean there's a few errors going on, but the main one I want to pick on is that Carmen's bar is too high on her shoulders. Okay, so if she wanted to, she's trying to do a low bar squat, she's got a low bar squat mechanics in terms of how she's trying to let her torso angle fall forward, her hips shoot back a little bit, and just have that kind of angled squat. However, because the bar is too far forward, you can see almost instantly as she comes down, the bar is almost already in line with her toes. I mean, this video isn't directly from the side, but even if it was, I can bet that this bar is already too far over the toes, towards the toes, and not in the midfoot. And you can see every time she hits the bottom, you can see how her body shifts forwards for most of the reps. And the only way that she is going to fix not falling forwards with that bar position on too high on the shoulders, if she would have to be more upright. So she'll basically have to be in a high bar squat position, because that's the difference between high bar and low bar. With a high bar squat, the bar is higher up on your shoulders, probably where Carmen's bar is in a high bar position. However, you need to maintain your torso more upright to satisfy the demand of that bar traveling in a direct vertical line over your midfoot. Whereas in a low bar squat, if the bar is lower down your shoulders, you have to initiate some sort of, or have some sort of forward lean to keep that bar over the midfoot. So if you're trying to do a low bar squat, however, the bar is too high, you will end up like Carmen and you will keep falling into the toes. So Carmen's simple solution that she needs to do is put the bar a little bit lower down her back. This is an extremely common one that I see. I have done this one myself. Now this is sitting the hips too far back at the start of the movement. Okay, so let me do that because that kind of happened fast and you probably missed it. Sitting the hips back before the knees break. So you can see here, Nick has put his hips too far back relative to his knees. So his knees are still pretty straight. So he's shifted some of his mass actually behind his midfoot. And generally what happens, if you shift too much of your mass behind your midfoot, remember that our body wants to be in a balanced position. So it wants to keep that center of mass over the middle of our feet, because if that center of mass goes too far out of the base of support, we're going to fall over. So what I find happens in a squat, that if you sit the hips too far back at the start, you're going to get a compensation effect where the weight is going to shift back forwards, likely because your body is trying to get your center of mass back over your midfoot, because it wants to keep that center of mass over midfoot because it is the most balanced position. So if I let this play, you'll see what I mean. The hips shoot back and then Nick goes into his knees. You can tell by his going into his knees too much if you can. If you look at the, actually that bar path wasn't too bad, but if you look at the bar, particularly on this, let's slow down this first rep because this is the one he does it most on. Look at the side of the bar. Shot his hips too far back. Now he's coming down, and then you can see that the knees start bending, and look at the bar coming forward, and now when he hits the bottom, look how it, see how it tips forward. Alright, now when he comes up, not only is he trying to get the bar up, but also he's trying to utilize energy to bring it back towards his midfoot. So when you are squatting, your hips and knees should be breaking at the same time and not sitting back at the hips, or the hips should not be breaking before the knees. Likewise the knees shouldn't break before the hips. You should try to get them happening at the same time, because as I said, if the hips shoot too far back, generally what happens is the weight is going to shift forward, like we can see is happening. Yeah, that one went forward. But if we like see this rep here, so I think it was the next one, gets back, weight shifts forward, and you can see how much he shifts his weight into the toes. So do not sit the hips back at the start. If we go back to Kirsten's example, when she comes down, you'll see that her hips and knees break all at the same time. Okay, hips and knees breaking at the same time. She's not sitting the hips back. And then with that, she comes straight down and then straight back up, and it is a very efficient looking squat. Another error is a weak bar grip. So Emma's got a few errors going on, but I'm just going to focus on her bar grip. So with this, you can see that her grip is not very strong, and basically what I wanted to be doing is pulling that bar down into her back. Now what happens if you have a weak bar grip? There is a couple of things that happen. One, the bar can actually slide on your back. So it's no longer in the spot you've put it in whatever spot that Emma has the bar in her back here. It's going to slide forward. You can imagine if you're coming down for the squat and that bar slides forwards, well then it causes the problems that I've shown in the other previous videos of weight shifts into the toes, knees shift towards the toes, hips shift forward, barbell shifts forward. So you can see she's got a little bit of that was probably I mean, it's not a good rep, but it's a good example of, I don't know if it does it in slow motion. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see there's a bit of movement sliding of that bar up towards the neck, especially that rep there. The bar slides towards her neck. So that is one problem when you've got a weak bar grip. Two, the other problem is that if you are not actively pulling that bar down into your back, or if you're not keeping your upper back tight, however you want to keep your upper back tight, the upper back when you get down to the bottom might round like this. You can already see if my shoulders round like this and I've got a bar up on somewhere on my shoulders, where again it falls into that problem of that the bar's going to fall forward, which causes those chain reaction events, which causes the weight to shift forward, and that's not going to be a very efficient squat. So I'm going to make a whole separate Instagram post or YouTube, wherever you're watching this, on how to properly grab the bar, or how I like to teach people to grip to the bar. But I will show you a quick example of Ben here. I like to teach it with thumbs over the bar, okay, not around, thumbs over the bar with a neutral wrist. You can see that the wrists are neutral with Ben here. So all of the bar is sitting on the shoulders and all of the hand is on top of the bar. A lot of people grab it with their thumbs around and their wrist is bent like this, so some of the bar is on the back and then some of it is resting here, which might be a bit difficult to pull the bar down. Why I teach it like this with the hands over, thumbs over, all the bar on the back and all the hands on top of the bar, is that you can pull the bar down into your back and you get your upper back tight. So if you're pulling the bar down into your back, one, you got less it's going to be less likely that the bar moves because you were really pulling it down. Two, you're less likely to get the upper back rounding because your upper back is an extension, or those muscles of the shoulders are staying retracted because you are actively pulling that bar down into the back. You're essentially doing an isometric contraction of the upper back. As you can see, Ben here, he's essentially maxing out, doing a 175 kilo squat, and that bar is not moving, and he has pretty much minimum, rounding of the shoulders. Very, very good bar grip here. And I'm going to show you another example of the Benjamins here. This is a hard lift. In this first rep, he does a good job at keeping that bar tight, pulled down in his back, and he is working hard to maintain that torso position. You can see in this rep here, his chest wants to fall forwards. Alright, you can see it does a little bit. The shoulders come forward a tiny bit. You can see that the bar wants to slide forward a little bit. Because Ben is doing a very good job at pulling that bar down in his back, he essentially protected himself from this rep being pretty crap and him falling a lot of weight into his toes, and then, the whole point of this video of not shifting your weight into your toes. So you can see that his body really, really wanted to fall forward from collapsing at the upper back here, but he did good at offsetting. It happened like by a small amount, but it could have been a lot worse if he had a weak bar grip, okay, and was not holding that bar as tight as he was in that repetition or that set there. So the last common error, this is actually the easiest one to fix, but it's an easy one to fix, but some people find it hard because it's a habit that they have created over many hours of squatting, and that is changing your eye gaze throughout the lift. generally, whether if you want to look straight ahead or you want to look to the floor, that's a debate for another video. But whatever one you choose, you want to pick a point and look at that point the entire time. So if you want to look straight ahead, cool. Pick a point and look at that point the entire time. If you want to look towards the floor, cool. Look towards the floor, but look down towards the floor the entire time. Because what's happening with him, Harry, he originally looks down at the floor. Then as he comes down, he's looking straight ahead. Then as he comes up, he puts his head up. Then when he gets to the top, he puts his eyes back down. So he keeps changing his eye gaze. If you keep changing your eye gaze, you're going to lose balance. If you think that, if you're trying to stand on one leg, I will do that now. Let's see how good my single leg standing skills are. They're probably dog shit. But if I am going to balance on one leg, if I'm looking at one point, I'm going to be a lot balanced if I'm looking at just one point, okay? If I start going like this and looking around, look, I already fell over. Your body generally is going to move in the direction to which you are looking, okay? So if you're looking towards the floor like this, and then as you're coming down, you start to look up. As you look up, you're probably going to drift forward towards where you're looking. And then that's when you can get that, that balance or your weight shifting towards your toes. And then we've got that problem that I've been talking about the entire video. So, do not change your eye gaze during a squat. Look in one spot and fixate on that spot the entire time. Lastly, this one might be a subtle one. It might be hard to see in Harry, but when he gets to the top, okay, he's not in a balanced position. He gets to the top. These shoes aren't the best. They've got a bit they're quite squishy as well. That's another problem. But anyway, when he gets to the top, he's bouncing around. He's moving a little bit. So he is not in a total balanced position in some reps, okay? Some reps he's not in a total balanced position where he's back in his midfoot. If you are wobbling at the top and you haven't restored balance or you haven't stopped that like kind of body movement at the top, if you're wobbling at the top already, as you come down, that wobble is probably going to get worse, and that's when you can kind of fall forward or backwards as you're coming down for the squat. So what I suggest you do is, between every rep, is when you get to the top, you have to go back to your midfoot, wait till you are fully balanced before coming down for your next repetition. I think Ben does a good example of this. So he's quite balanced, he comes down, comes back up. When he gets to the top, he waits. See how he's getting his balance? See when he got to the top, there's a bit of movement going on. The bar's bouncing a bit. He's moving back and forward like this. He's getting some weight shifting in his toes and his heels. But what he does, he waits for that to stop. He waits for that to stop. He takes in his breath. He pulls down the bar. He waits for a split second because he's making sure that he's not moving around. He is dead still, or pretty close to dead still. And then if he's got that checklist of like, okay, I'm tight, took in my breath, I've pulled the bar, my balance is in my midfoot, I'm not moving around, I'm ready to come back down for my next repetition. So make sure you are balanced in your midfoot before you come down for your next repetition, because if you're not, you may find that you are going to lose balance as you are coming down. So that was some of the problems that can lead to someone falling into their toes when they are doing a squat. They are not all the problems, but they are some of the major ones that can happen. If you are having problems with your squat and you can't identify exactly what you are doing, you can feel free to send me your videos and I can have a quick look at that, and if it's an easy fix, I can probably give you some quick feedback on how you can fix your squat. Otherwise, if there's quite a lot going on, you can come down for a session at here SPC Performance Lab if you want to do a coaching session to go through your squat. We can do that, and I'm quite confident, regardless of what the problem is, I can probably fix it. And if you live far away and you are unable to make it physically here, I can also help your technique via online, pretty similar to what I'm doing now by having your video on my screen, and I can point out what you were doing wrong, and then I can make some further videos of showing you how to correct the errors that you are making. So if you want to get in contact, you can either send me a private message, or there is my SPC Performance Lab website. If you go there is contact forms there, or you can just email me directly. All the contact details are on the SPC Performance Lab website.